on a Friday evening, wanting to hear and learn a little more about our very, very important sector, the development sector. We realize that all of you have taken time out and been here, and we'd really, really like to make this evening worth it. My name is Abdul Rahim from IPE Global, and I'll be helping to take us through this evening today. We'll move right into the events for today, and I'd like to invite the dignitaries to take their place on the dais. Could I request, first of all, the Chairman and Managing Director of IPE Global, Mr. Ashwajit Singh, to please come and take his place on the dais. Could I request Mr. Amitabh Kant, I.A.S, Secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Government of India, to please take your place on the dais. Could I request our speaker for the evening, Mr. Onno Rühl, Country Director, World Bank India, to come and take your place on the dais. There's a very fabled character in Persian folklore called Mullah Nasruddin. Have you all heard of him? Yes. He seems to have an uncanny sense of humor and message. It seems one day this wise guy was called before a large august gathering and forced to stand in front and speak. He was very reluctant to speak. So there he stood and he said, "Do you all know what I'm going to say?" And everybody said, "No, we don't know what you're going to say." So he says, "What is the point of speaking to an audience who doesn't know what I'm going to say?" and walked off. The next week again they caught him in front of another audience and brought him there. And this time he asked, "Do you all know what I'm going to say today?" And everybody knew the trick. So they said, yes, we know what you're going to say. So he says, "If you already know, what is the point of my speaking?" and walked down. The third week when they cornered him, they decided among themselves. So when he got up and he said, "Do you know what I'm going to say?" half of them said yes, and half of them said no. So he says, "All those who know, tell those who don't." So to let us know what is the purpose of today's session, to let us know what we are exactly going to be learning, I'd like to invite, for the welcome address, the Chairman and Managing Director of IPE Global, Mr. Ashwajit Singh.
Mr. Amitabh Kant, Mr. Onno Rühl, guests from various donor, bilateral, multilateral agencies, government, civil society, and other dignitaries, thank you all for taking out time on a Friday evening and coming here to attend this lecture. This is the first IPE Global Annual Lecture that we plan to have. We have in the past been supporting a number of lectures, but this is the first lecture that we are organizing under the IPE Global Annual Lecture. Let me start by giving you the background a bit about IPE and the thinking that went behind into organizing this lecture. IPE was set up in 1998 by a few of us who are alumni of the London School of Economics. And we actually were sitting around and thinking of what are the various avenues, the gaps, that potential that we could sort of look at in terms of providing advisory services. And we realized that there were a number of companies working at the policy level, the international companies working at the policy level. Then at the same time, you had a number of NGOs working at the ground level. Given the 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment and a lot of decentralization happening, we realized that there was this huge vacuum between making policy a ground reality. And that's how IPE really set itself up as a small consulting company to try and bridge this gap. And as a result, we sort of work in policy and work right up to the implementation as well. So that's how we were set up 16 years ago. Over the last 16 years, it's been a very interesting journey. We've expanded our sectors, we've expanded our teams, we've expanded our geographies. And we've today emerged as the largest social development consulting firm in South Asia. And this is something that we sort of, did some research around, and we realized that in terms of sheer size and areas that we work in, we would now be the largest social development consulting firm in South Asia. We are a multidisciplinary firm and we offer a range of integrated, innovative, high-quality consulting solutions to the development sector. And we work across all the bilateral and multilateral agencies. So we've not sort of just concentrated on just one or two agencies, but we've been fortunate enough to work right from the bank to the USA to UK aid to JICA to European Union to UNICEF and World Bank. IPE today has a strength of 800 plus multidisciplinary team professionals, and that again is a strength because we have right from doctors to engineers to economists to social sector experts to analysts to finance people. We've got a multidisciplinary team, and we have 9 offices in India, and now, like the Make in India model, we've started sort of looking out of India for the last few years. We have 4 international offices. We have IPA Africa, based in Nairobi. We have an office in Ethiopia. We have an office in Dhaka. And last year we acquired Triple Line Consulting, a UK-based consulting company, which in fact some of the colleagues are here. And that gives us a very good team of 35 European consultants who've joined the IPE group. IPE works across sectors. That's another thing we've been doing. We've been expanding sectors as and when time comes. We work in urban and infrastructure. We do a fair amount of work in health, nutrition, and water sanitation, education and skill development, private sector development, environment and climate change. We have a division in agriculture and forest governance, and tourism and heritage. Of course, these are the sectors we work in, but then you've got the practices areas which are cross-cutting, and we work in grant and fund management, monitoring and evaluation, public finance, social and economic environment, and of course, governance and IT. As I mentioned, we started very small. We started as an Indian company, but we did realize that there is a lot of replicability and knowledge sharing that can be exchanged between other low-income countries and developing countries. So that's how we started our international journey, and we have for the last 7 years now been working outside India as well. And we are firmly of the belief that sustainable development is only possible if we are able to cross-learn from each other and not reinvent the wheel. Because every time if we've taken 10 or 15 years to find a particular solution to a challenging problem, every country doesn't need to take the same time. And I think within the country, within the states, within different countries, there is a huge potential of knowledge sharing and working together. Looking ahead, now that we have sort of worked in a number of projects, we want to focus on building a knowledge repository, and we would like to look at replicability across various sectors, various regions, and professionals as well. Keeping that in mind, last year we set up an IPE Global Center for Knowledge and Development, and this lecture is the first lecture that the IPE Global Center for Knowledge and Development is organizing. The IPE CKD is actually going to focus on research, publications, looking at trying to build a group of thought leaders. And I think that the difference here is given our consulting background, we would like to focus more on result-based research and not really academic research, because we are firm believers that if you work on the field, you can actually do better policy. If you work in the policy area or academics and manage to work on the field, you will write better reports as well, and you will understand the ground level situation. We do plan to have a number of quarterly roundtable discussions as well, and also form a few technical advisory networks which would comprise of people from government, from donors, from civil society, from private institutions as well as academics. We also thought that there are a number of awards in various areas. You have awards in government, in business, in music and art. There's not enough recognition for good work that's being done in the development and social sector. So we decided that we would also like to initiate, a some recognition of work that's being done, and we requested Justice Mukul Mudgil, former Chief Justice of Punjab and Haryana, to actually, he and Mr. Sunil Mitra, who's sitting here, who's the former Finance and Revenue Secretary, to really sit down and try and pick up a few cases where we could sort of try and recognize some good work that's been done in the development and social sector. So we plan to sort of initiate this. It's the first start, and over the years we would like to expand on this, the Excellence Awards in development sector as well. Now coming to the lecture this evening, we all have been talking about development, we all talk about sustainability, but I think we've been in the sector now for, as I mentioned, nearly 2 decades. And we've seen a real shift in terms of the way people used to actually think of development earlier and what it is all about today. It all started with what was the standalone development, where you really look at creating physical assets and not really look at the sustainability or the actual economic growth around it. The initial sort of development initiatives were not too well planned. You didn't look after the operation and maintenance. You didn't look after the economic development, revenue streams, etc. Didn't look at environment issues. Didn't look at climate change issues, or didn't even look at creating the right institutions to look at development. And it's now that there's a total shift, and you see more of this happening. There's a lot of work that's been done in the development sector, but the task is still unfinished, and there's a lot more to be done. The Millennium Development Goals, which have been tracked over the last 15 years, have shown significant improvement, especially in reducing the poverty. But we still have 1.2 billion poor people across the world. And that is more than the population of USA, Canada, and the 58 European countries put together. So what development are we talking about when we still have so many people really, living in abject poverty? Education continues to be a missing link between actual development. Closer home, India is still trailing in the MDGs. We still have issues of hunger, malnutrition, health, communicable diseases. There's lots to be done in India itself. It has been said that if you do the same thing more often, you get the same results time and time again. So there is a time to really rethink the way we are going ahead and try and relook at the whole issue about development and sustainability. To break this routine, of course, the government has launched a few initiatives. They've launched the Swachh Bharat, they've launched setting up the Niti Aayog, looking at Beti Bachao Andolan, and a number of other initiatives. Here, I would especially like to congratulate Mr. Amitabh Kant for the Make in India initiative, which we feel is a step in the right direction, because if we are looking at making at having sustainable development here, we need to create economic opportunities for people. And India is now positioned to be a global manufacturing hub. Mr. Amitabh Kant needs no introduction. He's this person who's launched not just Make in India, but some of the earlier initiatives. I'm sure all of you would have heard of them, but never connected Mr. Amitabh Kant with them. When he was in Kerala, he launched the God's Own Country tourism campaign, which is something we all sort of now look at Kerala and say God's own country. When he moved to the government of India, he started the Incredible India campaign. And of course, he's responsible for the Mumbai-Delhi corridor as well. He's been focusing a lot on Make in India, and we look forward to hearing his views on Make in India and its connection with, of course, the sustainable development. On a lighter vein, he's so result-oriented. I got an SMS from somebody the other day that ever since the Make in India initiative has been launched, the Indian cricket team has stopped making runs outside India. The only runs they seem to be making are in India. And given the fact that he himself has been captain of his school cricket team and a good cricket player, may I just request him to please send them a message, at least for the next month and a half. They are allowed to make runs outside India as well, especially in Australia and New Zealand. I'd like to also welcome Mr. Onno Rühl, the country head of the World Bank. He has a vast experience in the development sector, having not only been the head of the World Bank in India, but been the head of the bank in Nigeria and DRC. He's somebody who would be able to share with us his experiences of working in other countries as well, and see what works and what doesn't really work. Before we move into the topic for today, I have just 3 thoughts that I'd like to sort of share and sort of pose these teasers for them. What is the ultimate development that we are aiming for? If it is the development of the individual, then we are really looking at a high quality of life, good education, better life expectancy, security, stability. If you're looking at that, then where does the economic growth really come in? It ends up being a means to really achieve that. And where do we strike a balance between individual development and economic growth? So I hope they're able to address this while in the topic. The other thing is that if we are really looking at true sustainability, what are the tools that we can use to measure them? It's easy saying that, so-and-so ventures or initiatives are sustainable, but what are the tools? How do we really measure them, and how do we know whether something's been successful or not? And finally, we've seen that any kind of development that is required around is a long gestation development. But in a democracy like India, where the voters, where the citizens are very impatient, they're not ready to wait to look at sustainable development. How do you address that? Because the citizens want quick wins and fast results. Sustainability is something which is a long-term sustainability and development that we're looking at. So I think, I hope some of these questions are answered during the lecture. Thank you so much, both Mr. Kant and Mr. Onno, for being here today, and we look forward to hearing you. Thank you all for taking our time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for the welcome address. We are really very, very privileged to have Mr. Amitabh Kant with us today. As was mentioned, he's championed the God's Own Country campaign, he championed the Incredible India campaign, but even beyond that, he's got a large variety of expertise and experience in infrastructure development, tourism and hospitality. He was in fact the chairman and managing director of the India Tourism Development Corporation and responsible for that entire change and makeover which turned it into a profit-making entity. He's worked with a large number of international agencies, JBIC, UNDP, ADB, and he's been involved in a number of PPP initiatives as well, including the Calicut Airport. In his past experience with the Mumbai-Delhi Industrial Corridor Corporation, he's been working on developing more manufacturing opportunities, and now, as the Secretary for the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, he's championing the Make in India campaign. Sir, we are really, really very, very privileged to have you here with us, and I'd like to invite him for his opening remarks and address to all of us. To a huge round of applause, Mr. Amitabh Kant.
Ashwajit, Onno, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and a delight to be here. To my mind, the key challenge for India is really to grow at rapid rates, at rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, for 3 decades or more, to be able to lift its population above the poverty line and to create jobs for a very, very young population. India is passing through a window of demographic transition which rarely ever happens in history. And if you want to utilize it effectively, India needs to create jobs. And India needs to do this growth of 9 to 10% per annum year after year in an extremely innovative and extremely sustainable manner. If you look around the world, and if you look around the world post-World War II, all countries across who have grown and grown at rapid rates, there have been just 2 key drivers of growth. Just 2 key drivers of growth. One is manufacturing, and the other is urbanization. There's no country, actually, in reality, which has grown on the back of agriculture and created jobs for very long periods of time. And therefore, many of us in India, India, if you look at it, has grown on the back of services sector. 60% of our GDP comes from the services sector. Only 16% of our GDP comes from the manufacturing sector. Many of us, young Indians, started believing that we've bypassed the process of manufacturing, skipped it, and gone into the process of the services sector growth, and that we'll actually gone into a post-industrial state. Let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that there are huge perils of this in a country of 1.2 billion, where job creation is extremely critical and which is a key challenge, and no political party can survive if we are not able to create jobs and meet the aspirations of a very young population. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, to my mind, India has been an extremely reluctant manufacturer and an extremely reluctant urbanizer. And therefore, these are two key challenges which India will have to meet. India must drive growth in its manufacturing sector, take its GDP, its share of manufacturing in the GDP from 16 to 25%, create 100 million jobs in the next decade. If it is not able to do it, it'll be on the cusp of a social revolution, let me tell you. Secondly, India has also been a very reluctant urbanizer. When Europe and America urbanized, land, gas, and water were all cheaply available. These are very, very scarce commodities today. And because they were cheaply available, the American society could create cities. They could live in New Jersey, travel to New York, guzzle gas. They could create a city like Atlanta where 98.2% of the people travel by cars and pollute the entire city. And if you compare it with another city in Europe, which is exactly the same population, Barcelona, the ecological footprint of Atlanta is 12 times more. So the challenge for India is, as it starts its process of urbanization, is how do we create more Barcelonas rather than create Atlanta? And the challenge is, as the latest McKinsey study shows us, that in the next 2 decades, India will have 350 million people getting into the process of urbanization. 350 million young Indians will move into the process of urbanization. And as I talk here today, every minute 30 Indians are moving from rural areas to urban areas. And by 2050, 700 million additional Indians will get into the process of urbanization. How do we do it in an extremely sustainable and innovative manner is the key challenge. I think the challenges, many of these lessons to my mind come from the eastern part of the world and not the western part of the world. They come from a place called Kitakyushu in Japan, which became an extremely polluted, the Dokai Bay on which it is based became absolutely yellow from blue and became the most polluted city in the world. But in the 70s, it had driven the entire industrialization of Japan on the back of its steel mills and power plants. It's the women of Kitakyushu who led the movement for a cleaner Kitakyushu. They revolted against this pollution. The Ministry of Trade and Industries of Japan joined them, and today Kitakyushu actually is the most recycled city in the world. Everything is recycled. From automobiles to mobile phones to food, it's a recyclable city. It is the smartest city in the world today, according to me. They come from a city like Yokohama, where again, a young mayor and women of Yokohama led a movement to save almost 40% of the wastage of that city. It was a mass movement which led to almost 40%. They saved almost $4.5 billion in just saving of wastage. And therefore, and again, a great example in terms of better management of water, a unique management of recycling of water comes from Singapore. Singapore comes the management of how you manage rainfall, how do you do dual piping, how do you do just about every drop of water, including wastewater, is recycled and goes into human consumption. And the President and the Prime Minister of India, they all drink recycled water. 10% of the recycled water is used for human consumption. So these are unique lessons. Now, India's process of urbanization has been totally unplanned. As you drive down from here to Rajasthan, you'll see urbanization happening, but totally unplanned. And in the next 4 decades, we'll see more urbanization than what we've seen in the last 5,000 years in India. And the challenge is, how do we do it in a sustained, innovative manner? How do we plan for it? How do we recycle our water? How do we recycle our waste? And I think That is the way to move forward. Learn from these unique examples from across the world. I think the challenge is that we have an extremely aspirational young India. We have a population which is willing to bring in changes. We have a young population which is wanting change. We have a young child population which is wanting to drive growth. And I think the challenge in all of us is to how do we develop India, drive it on a high trajectory growth rate, and yet do it in an innovative and sustainable manner. I look forward to hearing from the World Bank President here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, sir. Those were really thought-provoking initial comments, and I'm sure we'll be looking forward to the next 40 minutes to answer some of these questions and to see where we have development in sustainability. Mullah Nasruddin and his wife, on the eve of Valentine's Day, as of today, his wife made a request that, why don't you give me a ring? Every time I see the ring, I'll remember you. Mullah, the quick wit that he was, said, but honey, you have a chance of losing the ring. And if you lose it, you might forget me. So why not I don't buy you a ring, and whenever you don't see a ring, you remember me. I think the question we have to ask is, are we wearing the ring of development or missing the ring of sustainability? And I think that's the topic for today's discussion. And to take us through this very thoughtful first IPE Global Lecture, we have with us the Country Director of World Bank India, Mr. Onno Rühl. He's been before this the Country Director for Nigeria, for World Bank, handling more than $3.4 billion in funds. Before that, he's been the Manager for Results and Learning in the World Bank's Africa region, working on accountability, systems, statistics, monitoring and evaluation, and increase the focus on results in World Bank finance projects in Africa. He's also been the country manager for the Democratic Republic of Congo. And during his stint in Africa, his most important achievement has been overseeing the World Bank's support for creation and financing of the African Trade Insurance Agency. Before the World Bank, he's been with the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has been the Economic Secretary at the RNE, Royal Netherlands Embassy in Washington, D.C. Before that, he had a career teaching economics in Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't wait to hear more on this very interesting and important topic on development and sustainability. Please put your hands together to welcome our speaker for the day, Mr. Onno Rühl.
Mr. Ashwajit Singh, Mr. Amitabh Kant, I understand I have to speak for 40 minutes, which is a scary prospect on the eve of Valentine's Day, but it's really a great pleasure to be here, and a great topic that is dear to my heart for a very simple reason. In 1972, I was sitting at the kitchen table in my house. It was in the early fall, and my father came back from a trip, and he put a book in front of me. And he said, son, you should read this book. Now, the book looked rather boring. It was the color of a manila folder. And it had letters that kind of reminds one of a World Bank board document. For those of you who work at the World Bank, some of them are in the room. They look really boring. And I was 10 years old at the time, and I loved reading. And in fact, I loved it so much that I knew nothing better to do than to read the Bible cover to cover, because I didn't have enough books. But I didn't read what my father put in front of me, because I didn't think it looked exciting. And anyway, a 10-year-old boy typically doesn't read what his father tells him to read. So I left the book, and I went on to grow up and never thought about it again, until I was in the University of Amsterdam at some point. And I was studying economics, and somebody started talking about the concept of thinking about the environment in economics. They didn't talk about sustainability at the time. And I said, what is that? He said, well, it started with the Club of Rome. They issued a report in 1972 called Limits to Growth. And I suddenly realized with a shudder that that was the book that my father had put in front of me. In the meantime, I wondered why we didn't have a car at home, because we never did. I wondered why my bedroom was not heated, although we had central heating in the Netherlands and it's very cold. I wondered about many things. I simply thought my father was stingy because he certainly wasn't poor. But in fact, he had read the reports. Now, those of you who know about sustainability know that that report was visionary and flawed at the same time, because it introduced the rather Malthusian concept of realizing that there is an issue about how many resources do we have on the planet to create how much of growth. But it was flawed in that the analysis was far too static. But I didn't read it, so in the meantime I'd gone on to purchase a car, because I didn't have a car at home. I had 1,000 guilders, I could buy a Mini with it, and I wanted to have a Mini and I thought it was cool. Obviously my bedroom was always heated and I did not become a vegetarian. All of which would have been would have been very much better choices for me. So that's how I was introduced to the concept of sustainability. And therefore I was delighted to be asked tonight to give a lecture on development and sustainability. And Amitabh made my task a lot easier because he defined development exactly as I would define it for India. It's very simple. You can have a very long debate about what development is, but for India it's a very simple thing. India needs 30 years of no less than 8% growth. I'm all with 9 to 10, absolutely okay. Wouldn't mind 11 either. It needs the kind of growth that creates jobs, and it needs the kind of growth that lifts people out of poverty. And that makes it very easy also to define that in the global goals of the World Bank, which are to eliminate extreme poverty from the planet by 2030. So obviously this 30 years will bring us beyond 2030 and just getting above the Tendulkar line. This is the professor, not the cricketer, who unfortunately won't be able to defend his World Cup. Is not enough. So I'm fully buy into the 30-year motto. Now, having defined development as such and focusing on India, then the question is, what is sustainability? Sustainability to me is a very simple concept. It's not climate change or environment or this or that. It's the concept that you grow in a way that every day you can keep growing in the same way and you haven't depleted whatever it is that supports that growth. So you can do that generation to generation. People like that. You can say the father should leave for his son or daughter what sustains the growth in their life. And you can make it sound beautiful, but the concept is simple. You can only erode your resource base in the broader sense for a very short time if you want to keep sustaining the growth. Well, that then makes India's challenge very interesting, because India has clearly shown the potential to grow very rapidly. In fact, in the last 10 years, 10 years before the slowdown that is currently ending, thanks to Mr. Kant and others, India was actually growing very rapidly. It's clearly shown the ability to do so. India also showed actually in that time the ability to lift many people out of poverty. But there are issues with the way that happened, and if you ask yourself, could India do that for 30 years? You're asking a very, very difficult question. And it's a question that we should look into. So it is really important to realize that we should not therefore equate sustainability with climate change, because climate change gets us into a very difficult debate, especially for me, the son of a country which grew rapidly, without abandon, without limitation of resources. And if we had limitation of resources, we actually colonized and got the resources to support our own growth. So it's important to understand that, but it's also important to understand that it has very little to do with the challenges that face India today. But it's important for me to say it, because it's a lot easier to grow when you can colonize and supplement your own resources. It's just that that option is no longer available to any country, and that in itself is a good thing, but it means that we have to think about growing in a different way. So what is the platform that sustains growth? I like to keep things simple, so I think for simplicity's sake, it's just to look at the basic things that support human life, as well as growth. Well, that's obviously food, it is energy, it is water, and I think most of you would agree it's also air. Those things are absolutely necessary. Everything else you can talk about. We can do manufacturing. Actually, it's great to hear Amitabh about manufacturing, but he's been following me around Africa on CNN with his campaigns. I remember seeing God's Own Country, and I remember seeing Incredible India, time and time again watching CNN. So I think you also like the service sector, to be honest, and a great provider of jobs. But if you don't have food, if you don't have energy, if you don't have water, if you don't have air that you can breathe, then you're clearly sustaining the ability to actually life itself to sustain itself, let alone grow. So how are India's outlooks based on current patterns? Well, food is kind of interesting. India has the proud result of the Green Revolution and is clearly able to feed itself. It has issues in terms of productivity. It has issues in terms of how agriculture sustains itself, starting from the Punjab in terms of groundwater depletion. But it has such low agriculture productivity right now that actually it's easy to imagine that it could increase agriculture productivity, face up to the challenges and keep feeding itself. It would have to do that in a way that protects it against some of the patterns of climate change, which will threaten Indian agriculture. But overall, I would give it a sort of plus in terms of India being able to feed itself and possibly export significant quantities of food over the next 30 years without any major systemic changes. It would require, of course, increased investment and research in agriculture. So energy. Well, energy is a bit of a problem, of course, because it's well known that India's major source of energy under the ground is coal, which is a good source of energy if you want to generate electricity, but a really not so good source of energy if you're vulnerable to climate change and if you have pollution problems. But then, even with the coal, India has large needs for imports. India also has great potential for renewables, though. Still, on any projection, it is really hard to see how India could grow for 30 years at 8, 9, 10% and not change the patterns of energy usage and succeed. It's very hard to see where it would earn the export earnings to pay for the oil it would need. It's hard to see how 30 years from now the kind of coal mix in the energy provision would still be acceptable from a pollution perspective, because coal is not just an issue of climate change, it's an issue of source pollution that has terrible consequences. And if you don't know about them, you could ask Sunita Naran to explain them to you in detail. She's much better at that than I am. So India's energy patterns probably have to change for growth to be sustainable. Then water. Water is problematic. India doesn't actually have very little water compared to other countries, but it's a bit on the lower side. But 90% of the water gets used in agriculture, and that's a very, very unsustainable pattern. So what I said about agriculture impacts water. There are also parts of India that are really extremely vulnerable and increasingly so, but the biggest problem with water, you can see in the Punjab today and in many other states, is that the groundwater isn't just depleting, it's actually getting poisoned because of other patterns there. I promise you, I'll end this lecture on a positive note, but there's a passing in discussing about sustainability that is about awareness of some of the issues that need to be dealt with. So I'm saying all this in friendship and in optimism. But the truth is, India will not be able to grow for 30 years at 8, 9, and 10% without significantly changing the way it manages its water resources. It's an extremely important issue. And of course, that includes the challenge of cleaning India's rivers, which is an extremely important challenge. And a well-known journalist here in the city gave me some really shocking figures, not about the Ganga, which is the government's important priority, but about its twin river, the Yamuna, which is dear to us here in Delhi. The challenges of pollution in water and rivers is also considerable. So then let's go to air. Well, this air was a controversial issue in Delhi 1 year ago, because 1 year ago a journalist had the courage to write in a newspaper that Delhi was actually the most polluted city in the world. And the first reaction was, this can't be true, it's not possible that it is dirtier than Beijing. I fully sympathize with the geopolitical considerations underpinning that statement. But unfortunately, this year the new ranking came out, and The ranking was of the 30 most polluted cities in the world, and 15 of them are in India, and in fact the top 4 are all in India. And I was shocked to see a city like Dehradun in the top 30 in the world, Patna in the top 4 of the world. It's really shocking. It's shocking to those of us in the international community in Delhi, because those of us in the international community now face the constraint of not being able to get people with children to come and work in Delhi from abroad. And I think to myself, okay, this is great. The German embassy reacted to that, I think, sensibly by saying, let's have people come for only 2 years, because that way at least the impact on the children won't be so much. But you know, there's 20 million people living in Delhi who do not have the luxury of moving their children out after 2 years. So if we continue to grow the way we grow, I don't know that it's going to be possible to live in Delhi 30 years from now. And I certainly hope it will be, because Delhi is an eternal city and should be. It's a place I've grown to love. But I have the luxury of being able to move out. Most Delhiites don't. So definitely patterns there also need to change. So the question then becomes, how does one change these patterns? What do we do? Well, first I want to come back to my story about the kitchen table. Because as I just illustrated, I missed some opportunities to change my own behavioral patterns to contribute to a different way of growing. And it's important always to note that all of us individually have the opportunity to do so. It doesn't take much. This plastic bottle could be replaced with a jug of filtered water. There's no need to put it in a plastic bottle. And all of us feel very comfortable drinking water from plastic bottles the whole time, because we know it's safe. There is an island in the Pacific the size of Belgium with plastic bags and plastic bottles. But it feels very comfortable to drink from a plastic bottle, you're certain it's safe. It's not a good habit. The weather today is beautiful. In fact, I went for a walk in Lodi Garden thinking what I would say today. But I subsequently went to take a car to come here, although I live at walking distance. So I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming myself. I don't know how you came here, but my humble guess is that most of you also came by car. It's very easy to change certain habits. You have a very high propensity to be vegetarian in India, although not as high as I thought before I came to India. It's a great choice for the planet. But I'm too lazy to do it. I was actually a vegetarian for 2 years and then thought the cooking was too complicated to sustain. We can buy different lamps. So I tried that. 10 days ago I went to Cannes Market because a tube had broken in my kitchen. So I went to this little electrician that most of you probably know, this hole-in-the-wall store at Cannes Market that has absolutely everything. And he had a sign saying he had LED lamps of the same size of my tube. So I asked him, can I have LED lamp? He says, sir, LED bahut महंगे hai. And I thought, oh, in that case I better not buy it. It was a silly choice, but I made it. All of us, every day, we make choices that impact how we develop and how sustainable our development is. I'm not suggesting that some of us changing our behavior will be enough. But I would suggest that all of us would be easily capable of cutting our energy use by 10% without significantly impacting the comfort of our life. That is partly because none of us are actually really poor. It's much more difficult for poor people to make choices like that. And poor people actually are forced to be more careful than we are, which is why their per capita emissions are so much lower than ours. So I personally think that my father was really visionary, because his message to me was, boy, please understand that your choices are going to impact the future of our planet. But I failed to read the book. The problem is, so did most of you. And that's a pity. Because free, lots of energy, we all feel better making the right choices, and we go on a better growth path. It won't be enough, though. So the question is, what do you do more? Because one of the elements of changing the path of development so that it becomes sustainable is clearly in behaviors, as I tried to illustrate. Well, by far not all the behaviors can be influenced the way I just described, and the changes required are by far greater than what we can do just by changing our behaviors. I'm just suggesting that it is actually a really great thing to strive and do, and I'm humbly admitting that I find it very difficult, but I keep trying. Governments can do a lot too in changing behaviors. They can do rather spectacular things. In fact, India, well, it wasn't actually the government, I think it was the Supreme Court, forced all its public transport, at least in Delhi initially, on CNG. Boom. It was done. That was regulation. We worked with the BEE on something that I always thought was fascinating. The second most important electrical household good in India is a fan, a ceiling fan. And ceiling fans, actually, the technology is available to make them twice as efficient, but people weren't making the twice as efficient type because it was slightly too expensive, and ceiling fans are typically not bought by people who want to spend more money than is absolutely necessary. So we worked with BEE to promote driving down the cost so that the twice as expensive ceiling fans would be available for the same price as the not so efficient ones. Now, we at the World Bank outdo the government of India by far in bureaucracy, and therefore trying to think about how to actually implement this project. About a year and a half later, we realized that it was very difficult, but so we looked again with BE at the goal. And it turned out that absent the project, because there had been some focus groups with industry about how to make these things more efficient, which is essentially you insert a chip that manages the motor more efficiently. It turned out that industry all on itself had already saved 60% of the use. If you got, well, 50%, 60, so it's like 30, right? So they got to 60% of the savings in a year and a half without World Bank project, simply because we talked to them about it. Because they didn't actually think it was a bad deal. They thought it was rather cool to be able to say that this fan is also efficient, and it didn't actually cost much to make it that way. So that wasn't even regulation. But regulation can also work. Many of you will remember the ozone layer, right? The ozone hole, the hole in the ozone layer, and how we learned at some point that CFCs in refrigerators threatened the hole in the ozone layer. So this was actually a great example. At that point, nobody in the world argued whose fault it was, where it came from, what to do, because it was such a threatening thing that looked really scary to everybody. Everybody agreed we just have to deal with this. So we agreed to eliminate CFCs from cooling devices in 10 years. They were actually gone in 5. The countries came together and just said, finished. It can be done. So regulation is really important. I don't think the kind of changes that are required to make development sustainable, to allow India to grow for 30 years at the percentages that Amitabh wants, can be done without regulation. But I hope it can be the kind of regulation that is kind of empowering. I have a favorite. So one of my gripes is that very few people seem to understand how thermostats work. Anybody know how thermostats work? So a thermostat is a device where you say the temperature you want in the space that you want. So for instance, let's assume you're in your room and you're comfortable at 23 degrees. Most men it's 22, most women it's 24 actually. But after having negotiated between the two, you agree on 23, so the thermostat you put on 23, the air conditioner or the heater puts it on 23. Now, all air conditioners in the world, actually their lowest setting is 16. And what most men do, when they come into a room that is too hot, they say, it's very hot here, let's put it on 16, it will cool quicker. And then it cools to 16, and usually we keep it there, and we actually get used to 16. In fact, some of us start wearing ponchos because it's now 16 degrees. So an easy regulation, I think something that Amitabh could really pick up, because he's the kind of guy who could make this happen, is to simply say, let's not allow air conditioners with a setting below, I don't know, maybe 23 is a bit hideous, but why would you need below 19 or 20? The energy savings would be tremendous. Or a heater that doesn't go higher than 20, 21, 23, and for India maybe 24, but definitely not 28. Simple things can have an enormous impact if you look at the usage, but it will still not be enough. If we reach perfect regulation and behavior on how we use energy, how we use water, how we keep air clean. I don't think it will be clean enough to allow India to grow for 8, 9, 10 years. And therefore, I think we need more than that. So what is it that the Club of Rome really forgot? They really forgot that humanity is a species that adapts really well. They really forgot that technology changes. And I've just told you a few very simple stories about changing technology under pressure of regulation. But the big factor is the rate of innovation. Well, the rate of innovation has been tremendous in the last 200 years. In fact, the rate of innovation in the last 200 years has been more than the rest of humanity taken together. It's just that there's a bit of a myth about how well innovation is going, because we have these things and there are such fantastic innovations. The only thing is they don't actually really make our development much more sustainable unless you give up printing and read on these things, but most of us are actually uncomfortable doing that and prefer to read like this. It feels much more comfortable. There was actually more innovation in the physical sense in the Industrial Revolution, but there is a dire need for innovation in the physical sense to sustain India's growth for the next 30 years. And this is where the optimistic part of the story comes. India is the absolute world champion in a concept called frugal engineering. In fact, India, if I'm not mistaken, sent a satellite to Mars successfully for less than $80 million. Is that the correct number, Amitabh? I think the next country did it for $1.5 billion. And they failed on the first try. India is the country where I met a guy in rural Bihar in a village with a sawmill where there were many deaf old men who made out of electronic waste a hearing aid that cost 60 rupees. And it works. It even looks cool. And when I asked him, did he patent it? He said, nah, it's not a very good innovation. I'm working on my next one. The boy was 17 years old. Just incredible. India is the country of Aravind eye care, where unit costs for operations are achieved that are less than 1/100th of what is achieved in OECD countries. India really has a special knack, because of what it is and how many people there are and all the pressures, to invent ways to do things, not just in innovative ways, but in innovative ways that drive down the cost. Now, guess what? That is exactly what you need to answer the questions that will allow India to grow for the next 30 years at 8, 9, 10%. You need solutions that make things cheaper, that make things less resource intensive, that make things more frugal. So I really don't think there's a country other than India, and I've traveled quite a bit, that has so much of that potential. And India, of course, has a very proud track record of innovation in recent decades already. So whilst India, of course, will need to negotiate whatever it needs to negotiate in the climate change negotiations, and I wish India great luck in that, and good success, India actually has the opportunity to lead the world into inventing a different way to grow. Why? Because India itself cannot grow without inventing that way to grow. So it is a need that is absolutely 100% compelling for the country's own ambition, as spelled out so clearly by Mr. Kant. And if India does that, and I think it will, because I'm very convinced that India's youth will not allow India not to grow at 8, 9, 10%, because it's just a scenario that doesn't work in any way if you think of the consequences. So when India will make these inventions bit by bit, but hopefully rapidly, India will become the world leader in selling concepts of innovation that support frugal, innovative, sustainable growth. And Mr. Kant will call that Make in India. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Onno. You ended on a positive note. We have some time for interaction from the floor, and I'd like to invite some of the guests here to make the floor comments. Do we have microphones? Do we have microphones in the audience? Okay. We have with us here Madam Zenebu Tedesi, the Honorable Minister, Women, Children and Youth Affairs, Government of Ethiopia. Could I request you, ma'am, to please make a few comments on the presentation and discussions today?
Actually, it's not related with the presentation and the presentation what I have taken the two persons, but I would like to give about what I want to give you the witness about Her Excellency Ambassador Ghana. So I think it's better to say later on.
Later, sure,
Yeah.
sure. We also have with us Dr. Nancy Godfrey, who's the Director of the Health Office of USAID India. Could
Thank
you
you.
request your comments,
Thank
Nancy,
you.
please?
It's a humbling experience to be asked to comment. Congratulations to both Mr. Kant and Mr. Rühl for, I think, capturing the vision for India and the hope that India can lead innovations for sustainability and growth that other countries can then follow. So just to thank you for both the challenges at an individual level, at an organizational level, I think at a society and a larger level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have also with us Dr. Lydia Richardson, who's one of the founding partners of 999 Consulting UK, which is now part of IPE Global. Could I request Lydia for your floor comments, please?
Okay. Thank you very much to the speakers. I thought it was a very stimulating discussion. As we move from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals, it's a very good time to reflect on global development. And I very much like the emphasis on you can make a difference at a personal level, wherever you sit in the world. So from the UK and from India and for other people here from Africa, Asia, Latin America, I think it's about partnership, about networks and relationships at all levels, whether government, private sector, NGOs, civil society, to be able to work together more holistically, to think through the work we're doing and how we can make a difference to different people's lives, whether you're sitting in government or sitting in a rural village or in a polluted city, how we can innovate, how we can make a difference. Just a couple of things weren't mentioned. Education, education is often thought of at the heart of development, and I just thought maybe we should think about that, how we can improve all sorts of formal and informal education, and knowledge sharing is part of education. So I welcome this event as an initiative to share our knowledge and to continue that through dialogue and globally as well as locally. The dynamic and warm feeling of India, a personal and cultural emphasis I think is important. It's not just about economic growth, but the how is also the social side of being a person and being a culturally sensitive, the warmth of the people basically to bring that out as part of the growth. So those are my comments, but I really enjoyed both presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lydia. We have some time for any other comments from the floor, any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists here, any comments, any suggestions you'd like to make? Yes, please. Yeah. Could you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Dr. Sam here. I work for AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which is based out of LA, and we have an office in Delhi. Thanks for both your presentations, very enriching thoughts. I just want to you also mentioned, both of you mentioned about the ecological footprint. How many of us sitting here know about it? Ecological footprint. I see a lot of people from the bank, but I don't want bank people to be here. How many of us know ecological footprint? So that beats it. I think that beats it. I think we should start from there. I'm happy to announce that when I did my ecological footprint last week, for me it came that I would need 7 Earths more with my consumption right now. I don't know how many of you agree and how many of of you would want to do that very honestly. Because it's like a questionnaire. I mean, there is ecologicalfootprint.com. You can just go in and do your statistics and find out. And for me, it meant that, I would need 7 Earths before I leave this place called Earth with my current consumption, energy, and others. And we are talking about development and sustainability. And I think I saw 7 hands up here which said they know about ecological footprint. I think we should start from there. Thank you so much.
There's a lot to think about in today's presentation. There's a lot takeaway, there's a lot that we can do individually. I mean, this suggestion about ecological footprint. Yes, Dr. Chaudhary here would like to share.
That one is the growth, another is the development. And the development is basically structural changes. My question or my thinking is, we need innovations, we need the manufacturing to go up, and all these are definitely, and we also need to have ecological footprint. But the main question is, either you leave it to chance that the people of India will come out with all kinds of necessary innovations, or you design those innovations, which means you have to have an institutional framework. You have to have a very clear idea how you promote innovations at a level which would be required to meet the challenges.
So definitely, you have a very good point. Innovation happens. The boy near the sawmill innovated because there was a need, because there were many deaf people and he tried to help them, but it doesn't always happen that way. So there is a role for a framework, but I would still, I told you the story about the ceiling fans to show that we were working with the government to create a framework that would let people innovate, and then they innovated all by themselves. Still, even then, great progress in fuel efficiency of cars. Why? Simply because governments set fuel efficiency standards, and the industry always clamors when they do, but then they just meet the standard. I don't know who here is a Formula One fan, but I am, I have to admit, shamefully, because it's a horrible ecological footprint. They said we need different engines that have less fuel, different technology, because it will be more efficient, and we just want to see how they can do it. Within 1 year, they produced engines with a new technology that actually had more horsepower than the old-fashioned engines before. So I think the way to promote innovation is simply to set standards, and then let the innovators innovate. But I do think there's a role for governments, hopefully under pressure from society, to set standards. And actually, people make more money that way because it employs engineers who create the innovation. So it's actually another great Make in India type thing.
Good point. Anybody else? Last question, if anybody from the floor.
No, I just wanted to make a point.
Okay, please.
To my mind, India's unique opportunity is in the fact that it's a society which is being driven by mobile telephony. You have 950 million mobiles. You're adding about 8.5 to 9 million mobiles a month. All the young innovators that are coming up, Flipkart, Snapdeal, all these are young Indians. Make My Trip, all these are young innovators. They're all using smartphones to drive the business model. India needs to use its mobile telephony to make a technological leapfrogging. Just cut through the brick and mortar approach which the Western world had adopted and use the digital world to cut through it. Use the digital world to innovate. And I tell you, that is the future for India. You just need to create an ecosystem of innovation where last year, in 1 year, Israel created 44,000 startups. 44,000 startups in 1 year. They just created a fund of funds which supported venture funds. They have a thriving venture fund industry. They provide the necessary tax breaks. India just needs to support venture funds. They will do their due diligence, find the right innovators, just support them. And India just needs to do that, and the rest of India will take off. We need to make it a nation of job creators rather than job seekers. We need to create an India of young entrepreneurs. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Just to add, I think mobile is an excellent idea. I mean, we've got the whole of Kenya, you've got E-Pesa and so much happening in Kenya. But I think here we also need to look at the regulation. I mean, today we talk about direct benefit transfers, we talk about mobile banking, but there are certain changes that we need to make at the policy level. So I think once that does happen, I'm sure mobiles would really change the entire way that we work.
Amit, can we have a microphone?
My name is Amit Kaushik. I work for IPE Global. First of all, thank you, Mr. Rühl and Mr. Kant, for your respective presentations. I think you've given us a great deal to think about. And my question is addressed to both of you, really. I think, especially in the context of what Mr. Kant just said about creating the enabling environment, when you talk about development and sustainability or sustainable development, what about the aspect of inclusion, particularly for a country like India, where you have such wide disparities? How do you ensure sustainable development along with a much wider degree of inclusion than we've seen so far?
So if I may, Amitabh, I'll start off. And so when I was thinking about what to say tonight, I thought about whether or not to broach the inclusion question. And I chose not to because I wanted to make the sustainability argument in a way that there was enough time to make it. But having asked the question, I personally think that, first of all, our goal is to help eliminate extreme poverty from the entire world. That includes India, and that cannot be achieved without inclusion, because it means everybody is no longer poor. So obviously you have to include everybody to achieve that goal. But I do think that the social drivers that Mr. Kant talked about when he talked about the compelling need for growth can only be met positively if they're met in an inclusive way, because growth alone is not enough. Because the demographic dividend, as we call it, is absolutely a dividend potentially, but can be very, very difficult to realize, and is impossible to realize if you exclude large groups. You, in the sense of an unidentified person, not you or India itself. This is a problem of many countries. So I think sustaining growth also means that you sustain the coherence of your society in times of rapid change, because change is very rapid when you grow at 8, 9, 10%. You will not recognize the country even after 5 years at that growth rate. And therefore I think the question of inclusion is deeply important, but essentially does have to be addressed by society itself, which is why, as World Bank representative, I didn't feel I should make it part of my primary presentation.
Thank you so much. Last comment here, please. Yeah. Could we have the microphone?
Today the era is technological driven. What we are lacking here, the techniques, technologies are being developed at a faster pace. What is lacking is the mismatch in the skill development. And I think where we are lacking in India is the skill development. And in the skill development, there's a multiplicity of organization to get coordinated under one ministry or one organization. I think we need to have a sort of a coordinated effort for the skill development. There is a tremendous potential in this country among the people, but we do not have the opportunity to come to a one window as yet for skill development. The other is our project conceptualization, planning is very good. Where we fail is the execution and management. Evaluation, the word evaluation was said, that is not done. Large number of projects are being executed. We do not pass on the lessons of one project to the other so that the future projects, we cut down those encumbrances. Mr. Kant has been able to do that in the corridor, to an extent what I learn of, and that's what is required. Thank you.
Would you like to comment?
I think it's, some very important points have been made by General Chona. One is about skills. And to my mind, there's a huge learning experience from the German model of dual training, which, where they start training right from school onwards, and actually the curriculum is drawn by the private sector. It's drawn by the manufacturers themselves. They provide the machinery, the infrastructure is provided by the government, but everybody who's trained is actually getting a job simultaneously. He's trained to get in to the plant and machinery straight away and start producing. And the model is so unique that from that skill development institute, you grow, prosper, you evolve over a period of time. So the President Schroeder of Germany actually came from a skill development institute. And therefore, India needs to emulate that model of skill development of dual training. And to my mind, we need to truly change our educational system right from the school level onwards to give a huge impetus to skills. But the government has taken a number of initiatives. They've created this new Ministry for Skill and Entrepreneurship, which is driving several things, which is really doing the coordination. I don't agree that everything should be at one place. Allow 100 flowers to bloom. I mean, in my ministry, we are doing leather. We are creating the highest number of jobs. Last year itself, we created over 1.5 lakh jobs. Allow every textile ministry wants to create skills and get them jobs, fair enough. But the point is that when you train, ensure that the skill development is directly correlated to getting jobs simultaneously. That's important. The second point which he made was very important, and that's about learning lessons. And it's very important for India to do its project, and I emphasized that about urbanization. Urbanization is going to be very critical in India's context. That we must plan, learn from all the global experiences, plan. Don't repeat the mistake which the western part of the world has done. They created a polluting world. Don't follow that model at all. Create new cities. You will have to create new cities. If you don't create new cities, every single city of India will become a slum. But please embed them with public transportation. That's the best, only way you can bring in equality in society. Ensure that 90% of the people travel by public transport. Rest of the 10% should either cycle or walk. Don't create cities for cars, which the Western world has done. Create cities for people. And I think these are learning lessons. Plan them out well. Do detailed engineering well, and then if you've done your detailed engineering well, the execution will be perfect. Don't leave anything to chance.
Wonderful, thank you. A round of applause for both Mr. Amitabh Kant and Mr. Onno Rühl for their wonderful presentations and this session. Thank you so much. We now move on to the IPE Global Excellence Awards in the development sector. As was mentioned by Mr. Singh at the beginning, this is a small initiative by IPE Global to acknowledge and honor outstanding contributions for the development sector in various categories. The awardees for this year have been decided by a committee for excellence that was chaired by Justice Mukul Mudgal, former Chief Justice of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, and included Mr. Sunil Mitra, past Finance Secretary of Government of India, and Mr. Ashwajit Singh, Chairman and Managing Director, IPE Global. We have a small token, a small citation for all the winners, for all the people who've been awarded and acknowledged today, and just as a sign of acknowledging their contribution to this sector, I would request our guests, Mr. Onno and Mr. Amitabh Kant, to give out the awards, and I would like to invite to read out the citations and the award winners for today, Mrs. Tanya Singh, please.
IPE Global Development Sector Excellence Awards 2015 in the category International Relations is being presented to Her Excellency Kenneth Zwide, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Her Excellency Ms. Kenneth Zwide has contributed to the social sector for several years. First, in the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia as the Minister of Education, and now in India as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. She has also been the chairperson of a Forum of African Women Educationalists, FAWE, and a member of the Executive Board of UNESCO, as well as its Capacity Building Institute for Africa. In addition to strengthening ties between our two nations, the ambassador has greatly contributed to the dialogue on women's empowerment in both countries. During her tenure as Minister for Education in Ethiopia, she diligently and passionately promoted education for all, with a focus on gender concerns and relationships in order to foster a culture of mutual respect and understanding, eliminating injustice and inequality in the educational system. Her book, Resistance, Freedom and Empowerment, The Ethiopian Women's Struggle, published in 2014, is an achievement in itself, as it presents vividly a picture of the role of Ethiopian women in the political and social development of their country. The perseverance with which Ambassador has advocated and supported women's agenda and worked towards making their lives better is inspirational. She has inspired many young girls in India, Ethiopia, to take up challenging roles in their own lives. For the inspirational work carried out by her, directly as well as indirectly, by proactively participating in a global dialogue on women's issues and improving relations between Ethiopia and India, the Excellence Award Committee is honored to present to her Excellency, Ms. Genet Zawidi, the IPE Global Excellence Award 2015 in the International Relations category. IPE Global Development Sector Excellence Awards 2015 in the category NGO is being presented to Tamanna Foundation. The Tamanna Foundation has magnanimously contributed towards spreading awareness about autism through its work with autistic children in India, which has impacted the lives of thousands of differently able children across the country. The organization, created solely with the purpose of helping the cause of mainstreaming mentally challenged, disabled, and autistic children in 1984, has inspired many others to establish similar initiatives, giving hope to parents struggling with finding suitable education for their wards. Dr. Shama Chona, President Tamanna, is a renowned educationalist with over 5 decades of experience in the field of education. Dr. Chona is the only educationalist to have been conferred with the Padma Shri and the Padma Bhushan awards for her dedicated service and contribution in the field of education. She established a special school for the multiply challenged and autistic individuals at a time when special education services were practically non-existent in India. The Tamanna Foundation has come a long way because of Dr. Shama Chona's passion and perseverance to bring a change in the lives of these special young adults. Dr. Chona, through this initiative, Tamanna, has provided trainings of international standard to many who are working with intellectually disabled, not only in India, but in other countries of Southeast Asia region. Tamanna offers an individual educational program for every child, aimed at social economic independence, which incorporates special education, regular academic program through the I.A.S, therapeutic interventions, and vocational training. For the path-breaking work carried out by the founder president, Dr. Shama Chona, in mainstreaming differently abled children and making them self-reliant, the Excellence Award Committee is honored to present to her the IPE Global Excellence Award 2015 in the NGO category. IPE Global Development Sector Excellence Award 2015 in the category Bilateral, Multilateral Donor Agency is being presented to UNICEF. Before the launch of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, polio crippled an estimated 2 lakh children in India each year. As recently as 2009, India reported almost half the world's cases, 741 out of a total 1604 cases worldwide. Many health experts predicted India would be the last country to eradicate polio. Yet, in 2012, India achieved a major milestone. By passing 1 full year without recording any cases, India is no longer considered a polio endemic country. India overcame huge challenges thanks to the efforts made by UNICEF, WHO, Rotary International, Government of India, and private pediatricians. As one of the lead agencies of polio communication in India, UNICEF was mandated to coordinate pulse polio eradication activities and liaise with the government. Innovations in the program have played a great role in ensuring protection against polio for children, particularly in the hardest to reach and remote areas, the most vulnerable mobile migrant community, and in the high-risk areas of the country. The journey to a polio-free India is inspiring and provides a great deal of learnings for many countries still struggling with polio. The rafts of innovation that have been introduced in India to tackle polio are now followed in other countries after the success in India. For the path-breaking work carried out by UNICEF towards reaching the goals set out through the UN Global Polio Eradication Program in 1988 and in helping to make India polio-free, the Excellence Awards Committee is honored to present to it the IPE Global Excellence Awards 2015 in the bilateral and multilateral donor category. May I request Dr. Anisur Rehman Siddiqui to accept the award on behalf of UNICEF. The IPE Global Development Sector Excellence Awards 2015 in the category Corporate Social Responsibility is being presented to Cain India Limited. Cain India Limited is one of the largest independent oil and gas exploration and production companies in India and the fastest growing energy company in the world. At the same time, Cain India has also been committed to the highest standards of corporate social responsibility. The company believes that business growth should propel community growth and create value for all stakeholders. Cain India's social development initiatives have benefited 1 lakh households and more than 7 lakh lives through interventions in healthcare, education, livelihood, vocational skills, and infrastructure development across operational areas in India. Cain India Limited has emerged as one of the biggest and most effective CSR spending groups in the country in 2013-2014. Cain India's active role in the development sector and their generous contributions under CSR, especially in achieving inclusive growth of communities, is an inspiration to all of us. The company's focus on partnerships with government and non-government agencies has helped multiply the impact of programs like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Integrated Child Development Services, National Rural Livelihood Mission, National Health Mission, and Community Development. For the path-breaking work carried on by Cain India Limited in impacting so many through their CSR programs, the Excellence Awards Committee is honored to present it to the IPE Global Excellence Awards in the Corporate Social Responsibility category. May I request Mr. Nilesh Jain to accept the award on behalf of Cain India.
Thank you so much. Just a small token of appreciation and acknowledgement from our side. I realize Madam Zainabu Teresi wanted to speak on Her Excellency, the Ambassador from Ethiopia. Would you like to speak, ma'am?
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about Her Excellency Ambassador Ganat. Excellencies, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great joy and honor that I express the profound excitement I'm feeling at the core of my soul. Of my soul for finding myself unexpectedly at this marvelous event which many of our friends wish to be part of. It's indeed an astounding coincidence that my visit to this ancient and beautiful nation, India, coincided with this marvelous event in which Her Excellency Ambassador Ganat Zewde is deservedly honored and revered for her numerous eminent contribution and achievement. In my long acquaintance with Ambassador Ganat, I have been able to closely witness her steady progress both as a wonderful person and a prominent leader. And it is indeed an honor for me to be associated with such marvelous human being and to be able to speak highly about her achievements and contribution. Throughout the decades I have known Ganat, she has been a beloved sister, close friend, colleague, and a role model for me, as well as a role model for Ethiopian women. I have learned so many things and gained numerous qualities from her, as many others who have come to her proximity did. Ganat has, in all good and bad times, been a person of integrity, honesty, candor, and generosity. She has always been respectful and understanding to people and keen to offer her assistance. She is adamant in her beliefs and deeds and is a strong and dependable woman. She is also an intelligent, far-sighted person who prioritizes the greatest good of all and the advancement of humanity than insignificant personal gains. These are only very few of her personal qualities that has built her great personhood and contributed to her achievement in her personal life and careers, as well as earned her love and respect by all those who have known her. Ganat is known and respected by her colleagues and the public for her numerous endeavors and achievements. And indeed, she has contributed to the development of her country and the lives of many, as she has served at many high-ranking positions in her long career as a civil servant and senior government official. In earlier times, Ganat has played a major role in the amendment of legal frameworks that have been treated women unfairly. This has resulted in the revised laws that have given equal rights to women to that of their male counterparts. During her tenure as Ministry of Education, she has worked for and succeeded in improving the accessibility and quality of education throughout the country. During this time, Ganat made relentless effort to ensure the right of women to education and assist girls and women get and succeed in education. Her efforts in properly implementing the affirmative action in the education system allowed many girls to join higher education, and her endeavor to provide girls with tutorial and financial support in higher education helped many succeed in their education. In general, Ganat has been an integral part of the achievements Ethiopia has made in the education sector. Ganat's numerous achievements have continued today in the diplomatic arena. As ambassador of Ethiopia to India, she has been to date consolidating and expanding the diplomatic relation of the two sisterly nations and their respective people. Throughout her long life, Ganat has accumulated a great deal of knowledge and experience which we can tremendously learn from. Being one of the beneficiaries, I know she has been sharing this wealth of knowledge to her colleagues and those she has come
in contact with. Apart from being a government official, Gannet has expanded her horizon as a researcher and writer. In this regard, her book entitled Resistance, Freedom and Empowerment, The Ethiopian Woman's Struggle is a rich source of information on Ethiopian women and proof of her keen observation and deep knowledge. I can go and on talking about this wonderful woman. However, it suffices to say that she is an epitome of great personhood and success. It is my wish to see Gannet reach to more success in her personal life and career. Congratulations who are selected for this award, and I thank you for the organizers for this event. I thank you.
Thank you so much for those heartfelt words. We've had a wonderful evening here with wonderful lectures, thoughts, discussions, and a lot of knowledge, understanding, and thinking has been stimulated in all of us. To our panelists here who came in here, gave the time, and shared their knowledge with us, we'd like to share small tokens of gratefulness for their time and the effort they put. Could I request Dr. S.K. Chowdhury, our Executive Director of IPE Global, to please offer a small token of our gratefulness to Mr. Onno Rühl, the Country Director, World Bank of India. Could I request Dr. Lydia Richardson, Director of Triple Line Consulting UK and IPE Global India, to come up and please offer a small token of our thanks to Mr. Amitabh Kant for giving his time and sharing his thoughts with us today here. Votes are difficult and challenging at times. Mullah Nasruddin once stood for elections. He got all of 3 votes: himself, his wife, and a stranger. When his wife got to know, what was the question she asked? Who is she? Well, our final vote does not have any such challenges. I'd like to invite the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Triple Line Consulting and the Vice President of IPE Global to come in and offer a vote of thanks. Please welcome Matisse.
Thank you, Abdul. Mr. Rühl, Mr. Kant, Mr. Singh, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Do you know what I'm going to say? It's a privilege to have been asked to promote the vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of IPE Global, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Mr. Rühl for delivering a very, I would say, honest and frank lecture on development and sustainability. I very much enjoy that. I must also, on behalf of IPE Global, mention our deep sense of appreciation to Mr. Amitabh Kant's opening address and the way that he portrayed the vision for India. Your presence here, and indeed your contribution, have raised the profile and the importance of tonight's event, and I thank you very much for that. I also wish to express sincere thanks to the IPE Board of Directors for their support and encouragement in relation to the organization and hosting of this annual lecture. A special thanks to all of you attending on a Friday evening, participating actively, and taking away valuable time of your schedules, and perhaps also family commitments. It's a great joy for me to also extend a vote of thanks to all those who have contributed in one way or the other to make this lecture a success. Especially a big thank to you, Tanya, Rebecca, and Kriti. You deserve congratulations for a job well done. I would also like to congratulate the awardees. I wish to say thank you to all of you for you to contribute to make this place a better place to live. Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to thank the hotel here, Joe Boy, and its management and staff for looking after us tonight, and for allowing us to make use of these beautiful rooms that we are here. My colleague was telling me earlier today when I asked what a vote of thanks was, he said, you will be the person between the people and the drinks. Make it quick. So I will do that, and I wish for a very nice evening, and I look forward to meet you all out there. Enjoy. Thank you very much to everyone.